The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
At that time Jesus said to his disciples, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise be to the Lord Jesus Christ.
During these weekdays, the Gospel text comes to us from the Sermon on the Mount. And most of these days, it starts, "It was said to you of old." And then Jesus makes that dramatic statement, "But I say to you." It is said that the Sermon on the Mount, from which we have these texts, is kind of patterned on the Sermon on the other mount, is when Moses went up Mount Sinai to transmit the 10 Commandments received from God. And Matthew, who's writing to the Jewish Christians, is presenting, you could say, Jesus as the new Moses. But there is a mighty difference. Moses merely transmitted the law, but Jesus takes the law and interprets it. And he can do it because he's God. Who else can say, "But I say to you"? Today, Jesus refers to an ancient practice which said, "An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." It sounds terrible because, as someone said, we'll all end up blind and toothless. But for that time, it was considered forward-looking and progressive as it tried to limit the violence. Because if you murdered someone from a tribe, then they would strike back and murder 2 or more in retaliation, in revenge. And therefore, this kind of a law tried to limit it. It is this unrestrained, unchecked violence in society that Jesus addresses in today's gospel text. He reinterprets this law as he pushes this law to a higher level of understanding. He's offering a new challenge. He says that no matter how much this practice may have tried to restrict or limit the violence, as a disciple of Jesus, we must avoid all violence. In fact, to continue the cycle of violence just leads to further violence. But how do we respond to the oppressive, unjust, and violent attacker? Revenge in all its various forms is the more instinctive way, but it's not the better way. The way of active, not passive, non-violence in the long run is far more productive. It's far more in keeping with human ideals, human dignity, and leads to peace. And we have more than enough evidence in our world, in a bankruptcy of a never-ending cycle of violence and counter-violence. Now, this is true not only in our country and right now in so many countries across the world. It shows up in wars and quarrels, personal conflicts and fights. This is happening in our own homes and communities, our marriages and our families, between brothers and sisters, parents and children, and yes, between spouses. And sometimes we have lost our humanity in the process by the very viciousness that we are capable of. So Jesus is calling for a different kind of a response. He tells us to offer the wicked person no resistance. He makes the famous recommendation to turn the other cheek. If someone takes your tunic, give them your cloak as well. Is it to be taken literally? Is it practical? Are we really to allow people to walk over us and offer no resistance at all? Does a Christian have to be a doormat over which everyone could walk? Does a Christian have to allow himself or herself to be bullied? Does a Christian keep quiet in the face of injustice? That would be to miss the point. At the Passion of Jesus, when a soldier hit him, he did not offer the other cheek explicitly or invite another strike. Because the same Jesus says in John chapter 18, verse 23, if there is some offense in what I have said, point it out. But if not, why do you strike me? By not threatening or blocking another blow, he still, you could say, offers the other cheek. But he questions the injustice. Jesus does not teach us to be passive in the face of injustice and violence. And this example of active non-violence has been followed across the world and by some outstanding people in our own time. We think of Mahatma Gandhi in India, think of Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States, think of Nelson Mandela in South Africa. By the power of their non-violence, they stood up to oppressive forces, unjust forces in society. The Bible is not just a pious book unrelated to life and to the world. How do we apply this reading to our lives? It's interesting, in the first letter that Paul is writing, he's really showing the contrast between what violence does to society and to him and the disciples and how he chose to respond. It was a choice that he made. He did not get caught in the cycle or in the spiral of violence. The gospel challenges us how to respond to situations. And although this text was written so many centuries ago, it is relevant even today. Are we content to see revenge as a sweet way of getting even? Violence does not pay, and revenge is not sweet. What we pass off sometimes as justice is really hidden revenge, trying to settle scores with the one who has wronged us. The point that is being made in today's gospel text and what follows immediately is that we must not resist evil with evil. Persons will seek to attack us with the sharpness of their words, the sarcasm of their comments, their brutal violence, and their pettiness and bitterness can wound us so much that we cannot wait to settle them, to put them in their place, to rub their nose in the ground, to smash and destroy them. So teach them a lesson that they will never ever forget. If we are not careful, then consciously or even unconsciously, we enter into the cycle of violence. Because it makes therefore an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth far more prevalent in our lives if we are not careful and cautious about it. Evil has a way of being a poison, not only in the one who inflicts harm and evil on us, it has a way also of infecting us with the poison of bitterness and revenge, which ultimately destroys even us. Then we are no better than the one who does harm, violence, and evil to us. A story is told of a man who with his friend every morning went to pick up the newspaper. And very cheerfully he would greet the newspaper seller. Good morning. And all the response he got was a grumpy face who thrust the newspaper in his hand. He would say, thank you. So his friend said, I just can't understand. Every day we go through the same practice. He's so rough, rude to you, but you just respond with graciousness. He says, I do not know why he chooses to act in the manner he does, but I will not allow him to determine the way I should respond. We don't march to the drumbeat of evildoers. We march to the drumbeat of Jesus. There is, as I said, so much violence happening in the world right now. Almost diabolic. What's happening in the Middle East, in Russia, Ukraine, and why? Even in our own country, in India. Not just out there, but sometimes even in our own homes and families. There are so many families who rejoice about the peace and harmony they experience. But there are some families and marriages which is like a ticking time bomb, ready to explode. There's resentment, icy cold war, or just open conflict. When we hold on to the bitterness that these situations cause, hatred and revenge, we take the poison, as I often like to say, and hope the other will die. We must resist the evil, but not with the same poisonous tactics of the one who starts it. The Bible is not just about empty piety or passive devotion. It is a book about society and relationships. And the words and the challenge that Jesus places in this situation are addressed to us even today. May that response always be one of resisting evil, not with evil, but with good. And God gives us the grace to make it possible. As we heard St. Paul say in the first reading, as your fellow workers, we appeal to you not to receive the grace of God in vain. For he says, in an acceptable time I heard you. On the day of salvation I have helped you. Behold, now is the acceptable time. Now is the day of salvation. May we experience the grace that heals us in our woundedness, that enables us to stand up to the injustice and violence, but not in a way that destroys our life as well in the process.